Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, October 25th, 2022. Time for another show. And, of course, all the things that are usually happening are happening once again. And it's never easy to tell whether it's the sort of thing that we should be pausing and not doing the show with. I don't know. Some days it's difficult to decide how to start. We are back on live after a couple of days away. I hope you enjoyed the pre-recorded shows that I left behind for you on Friday and Monday, travel days for my weekend away. Now it can be revealed. The Philadelphia Phillies won the National League Championship Series over the weekend, largely, I think, in part, or at least in part, due to my presence in the city. I granted the city my presence for the weekend, in exchange for nothing, of course, because I didn't realize how valuable my presence was. Okay, so they won the championship series, about which I didn't really care in particular, except for the fact that I was in Philadelphia, so it was impossible to miss the fact that the series was going on, and the final games were being played there at home. And so, I guess all day Saturday, walking around, there were people in all their Phillies gear, and I think probably even by Friday night when we arrived, we saw it all over the place. Friday, Saturday, and of course Sunday during the day, and it was really something. Every TV in the city was tuned in, and then when they finally won, horns honking everywhere, impromptu parades in the streets, drums, and all sorts of nonsense going on. So quite exciting. Enough to make you care about, baseball in general, and certainly about Philadelphia Phillies baseball in particular. Not something I've ever felt before with respect to the Phillies, certainly. But I'm not a big enough baseball fan these days to have any particular preference. Philly wouldn't be my hometown team, and I always thought their uniforms were a little weird. But hey, okay. So congratulations to those who are excited about that, and sorry to San Diego, I guess, for having lost their series. All right. Many other things happening, of course. Hard to do a show from if you're really allowing yourself to be redirected by the cloud of mass and or school shootings, sometimes both under one umbrella. This time, I guess not qualifying necessarily as I guess enough people got injured to qualify as a mass shooting, but it was certainly a school shooting. And as I was skimming the papers this morning and looking over Twitter, what was happening this morning, I saw the HuffPost announcing that this was, by their reckoning, the 40th school, well, not by their reckoning, but the 40th school shooting of this year. In fact, it wasn't theirs. They credited the determination to Education Week, I believe, who has been apparently tracking that number since who knows when. Since 2018, if I recall correctly. Let's see, have they changed my layout of, it looks like it a little bit, changed layout in Twitter. But, here's the excerpt from their article. Monday's school shooting was the 40th this year, resulting in injuries or death, according to a tally by Education Week, the most in any year since it began tracking shootings in 2018. Just 5 years after I had begun tracking similar shootings. But it's about time for them to come around to realizing that it was something they need to monitor. It probably took them a long time to come to that conclusion that they really would have to dedicate resources at Education Week to gun policy issues. That's just now a reality of life in school in America, thanks to Republican intransigence when it comes to doing anything about it, because Second Amendment. So we have that to deal with. Today being Tuesday, we don't have Greg Dworkin with us, but we look forward to hearing from him tomorrow because developments in the UK are such that, that the whole election thingy was a big waste of time, I guess. They had a big contest between Liz Truss in the end, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, and decided which one of them should be the leader, and then they decided the other of them should be the leader, and so that's where we are now. Rishi Sunak becomes British Prime Minister and leader, of course, of the Tory party, and I guess that makes him, is he the first British Prime Minister of Indian extraction in history? And if I saw correct, say I only saw this information in passing because I was too busy enjoying the chaos of Philadelphia. But the first Hindu Prime Minister of Great Britain, so that's a pretty historic moment. And of course, the second Prime Minister, like in 5 weeks or something like that. So there's an awful lot of history wrapped up in this. Many other issues to catch up on today. Joan McCarter, I hope, will be with us in our last segment. For me, it is a Tuesday that feels like a Monday or even part of an extended long weekend because of being away from the microphone live Friday and then Monday again. For Joan, it is a Tuesday that feels like a Tuesday unless she has some other compelling reason to declare that it feels like a Monday or possibly a Friday. So we will find out in speaking to her. Other stories occupying time this morning and catching my eye yesterday. A brief bit of excitement as Merrick Garland held a press conference at the DOJ, announced it a couple hours ahead of time, and that gave people an hour or so on Twitter to talk about how they really, really wished it was about arresting Donald Trump, but I think everybody kind of knew that it wasn't going to be that. And they're going to do it by the book, and we're not going to hear much about this again until after the election. But instead, as it turns out, Garland was there to announce, election protection-related news. I have an NBC News article that says that he was announcing charges against 13 Chinese spy suspects. I don't know how many of them were hanging around at Mar-a-Lago, but you always have to keep an eye out, I guess. The Attorney General rolled out 3 cases involving allegations of separate schemes to, as you might have feared, unlawfully exert influence in the United States. Just a quick skim through, I think, a short-ish article about it by Rebecca Shabbat, Ryan Riley, and Ken Delanian. Again, NBC News. The Justice Department has charged now 13 people who tried, quote, to unlawfully exert influence in the United States for the People's Republic of China, U.S. officials allege. Attorney General Merrick Garland rolled out 3 different cases alleging separate schemes at a news conference on Monday. One case charges 7 Chinese nationals with trying to forcefully repatriate a Chinese national, another Chinese national, so 7 Chinese nationals working together to try to forcefully repatriate an 8th Chinese national. 4 others were charged with targeting people in the U.S. to act on China's behalf. 2 other men were charged with interfering in a U.S. criminal prosecution of a global telecommunications company. How do you like that? The Justice Department did not name the company involved in the 3rd case. You should probably be able to figure that out. Maybe NBC News has done that for us. The details of the complaint against the defendants, Guo Chun-hee and Zheng Wang, I'm guessing at my best pronunciations here, match up with a prosecution in the Eastern District of New York of, how do you pronounce this again? Huawei. Right, the Chinese telecom equipment manufacturer, we know about them, which the U.S. previously charged with stealing trade secrets and intellectual property information. The complaint accused the pair of trying to recruit an unnamed informant, just as well. Probably wouldn't be able to pronounce his name correctly anyway, because I'm just not good at that. But this unnamed informant, although, the informant could be, who knows, it could be a Slovakian name that I can't pronounce correctly, whom they paid $61,000 in Bitcoin in exchange for what they believed was confidential information about the Justice Department's investigation and prosecution of the company. Probably unwise these days to pay your informants in Bitcoin. By the time it, comes time for them to deliver the information to you, unless you are paying afterwards, you pay somebody $61,000 in Bitcoin, And then they go and collect the information and come back and the Bitcoin's worth $11 and they don't want to give you the information anymore. But, it's supposed to be untraceable, and yet here they are prosecuting them for it, so whatever. Anyway, asked Monday whether Huawei had any connection to he or Wang. I'm thinking about the Wang pronunciation. Probably, I'm sure it's not Wang. Like Wang, that Americanized Wang, but then you would put an O if you wanted us to go with it, but it's probably the same surname. Anyway, never mind. Asked Monday whether Huawei had any connections to he or Wang, a Justice Department official, not Chinese official, declined to confirm the identity of the company in the complaint, but it's all Huawei these days. Garland said, as these cases demonstrate, the government of China sought to interfere with the rights and freedoms of individuals in the United States, and they hate us for our freedoms, and to undermine our judicial system that protects those rights. They did not succeed. The Justice Department will not tolerate attempts by any foreign power to undermine the rule of law upon which our democracy is based. However, we will tolerate attempts by domestic powers to undermine the same. Garland was joined by Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco. Monaco, how are you? FBI Director Christopher Wray, Matthew G. Olson, the Assistant Attorney General for National Security, and other Justice Department officials. It was a cavalcade, if you will, of other Justice Department officials. Congratulations to all, I guess. Anyway, in case you were from 11:30 to 1 o'clock anticipating the arrest of Donald Trump, but then forgot about the whole thing and never tuned back in to find out what the press conference was about, that is the answer. All right, let's see. Other things to share with you. There are plenty. I happened to notice this morning. I thought it might be nice to share something from the LA Times. Just sort of an assessment, I guess, of where we are with, the survival of democracy in the next couple of weeks as the November elections now loom, just days away. My email box was stuffed by the same 5 candidates over and over again, just as I told you was the case earlier last week. Same folks, pretty much responsible for about 70 to 75% of my email volume. And it was interesting walking around Philadelphia and seeing the materials on display, the advertising materials, billboards and outdoor stuff around in the cityscape. Very little attention being paid in terms of street-level collateral to the gubernatorial race. The only things I saw on display there were a couple of places where I saw some remaining door hangers, as they call them, stuck in people's door jambs, etc. All the doors right down at street level in certain parts of Philadelphia, with lots of Josh Shapiro materials there. I didn't see anything in the way of Mastriano materials, and it seemed like a waste of time and money to do that sort of flyering in Philadelphia there. Expect big numbers for Shapiro there, but the only question is turnout. And then the Senate race was getting a lot more attention. And it looked to me like nothing in the way of direct paid advertising from the Oz campaign that I could see, but it looked like third-party, advocacy against Fetterman with just the most rudimentary, basic nonsense messages. I mean, down to like 2 words and 1 symbol, like they just were running ads, said like Fetterman equals crime and poverty. Fetterman equals, I don't remember what else they did. But the interesting thing about the one that was said crime and poverty was that I could not make out what the illustrating photo was supposed to be. It appeared to be, I don't know, maybe it was like boarded up windows or a boarded up business or something, but it was not getting any particular message across visually speaking. But of course, all they had were the 2 or 3 words there and then the equals sign. And I guess that's really all you need. I don't know how well that's working in Philadelphia. And of course, I don't think they're quite as scared of the idea of crime and poverty as they might be in, Lidditz, Pennsylvania, where they're concerned with that and pretzels and possibly potato chips. But other than that, in Philadelphia, I don't think it was making a dent. But it was interesting to see. So, I mentioned to you Los Angeles Times op-ed piece by Colin Clark, which I clicked on Twitter and was escorted to read, but only once, and then after that it said, no, you can't read it anymore, so now we have to go to Pocket in order to read this piece. Colin Clark, as it turns out, and tells you at the end of the article, is the director of research at the Swung Group, which I don't know, and the senior research fellow at the Swung Center, where he focuses on terrorism, counterterrorism, and international security. That doesn't bear that much, I don't think, on the topic of what he's writing about here, though. And the headline here, the title for the op-ed, A Midterm Elections Threat Assessment, High and Getting Higher. And that doesn't have anything to do with what was going on in Philadelphia this weekend, although I have to tell you, I was, by the end of the weekend, I did wonder about asking, perhaps here on the air, maybe if you're into Philadelphia, is there anyone in Philadelphia not smoking weed all day? I just was wondering about that because it certainly seemed that way, more so than I recall it ever being the case in any other major city, and even in recent years. But hey, and that's on the increase. But it was really something. Am I misremembering things here? Is this just what city smells like? I can't make out the difference here. All right. Oh, look, emergency text coming in that the bus still hasn't shown up yet for teenage schoolgoer, and that's unusual. But they were tinkering with the schedule a little bit, so I guess I just got to find out what's going on there. Not that there's anything I can do about it at this point, but I'll give you an update. In between snippets of this piece from the LA Times, with the November 8th midterm elections just 2 weeks away, there is growing concern for the potential of real-world political violence. That's where most of our political violence takes place these days. The hyper-partisan nature of U.S. politics, combined with rampant disinformation and the promotion of conspiracy theories about election integrity, are increasing the prospects for trouble at polling sites and harassment and intimidation of electoral workers. Across the country, there are reports of election offices taking preventative measures, including installing bulletproof and bomb-resistant glass, offering active shooter training, and fortifying walls with Kevlar to mitigate the effects of an attack. That's not really a great sign for American democracy, I would say, although it's pretty much like every day at public school. Violent rhetoric is exploding online. Sites like Telegram, Gab, and Parler are overrun with threats relating to, quote, taking up arms, in an effort to overturn by force what the individuals claim will be a rigged and stolen election. The temperature in the broader far-right ecosystem has been rising steadily since the FBI searched former President Trump's residence at Mar-a-Lago in August. After the search, a radicalized Trump supporter attempted to attack the FBI office in Cincinnati and was killed in a shootout with agents. The vitriol spewed on fringe message boards and is sometimes instigated by public figures, including elected officials, and of course people who we had the chance to elect again and didn't, and are not elected officials, but are stoking these flames nonetheless. But they're speaking here of Representative Murdery Trader Green, who recently spoke at a Trump rally in Michigan, firing up the crowd by declaring that, quote, Democrats want Republicans dead and they have already started the killings, unquote. Using his own social media platform, Truth Social, Trump suggested Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell had a, quote, and in all caps, death wish. All right, that was one way of putting it. By the way, everybody, the bus has just arrived. That's good news. So thumbs up for that. But Trump suggested Minority Leader Mitch McConnell had a death wish because McConnell agreed to fund the U.S. government through the remainder of this year. That's ordinarily minimum basic requirement of service in Congress, but now it's a death wish. When officials normalize violent rhetoric, it permeates the national discourse and lends credence to the idea that physical force is a legitimate political response. In other words, some members of Congress and a former president are attempting to mainstream fascism, there it is, in America. In the first quarter of 2022, the U.S. Capitol Police opened 1,820 cases against individuals making threats against members of Congress. Susan Collins, deeply concerned, and a fifth-term Republican senator from Maine, told the New York Times, "I wouldn't be surprised if a senator or House member were killed," going on to say, what started with abusive phone calls is now translating into active threats of violence and real violence. Of course, Gabby Giffords would tell you, yeah, it's kind of happened. Charges have been levied against more than 900 individuals for various crimes allegedly committed in the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, but the ongoing arrests and trials have had less of a deterrent effect on violent rhetoric and rumblings than many analysts expected. In part, this is related to the anonymity provided by encrypted social media platforms. The staying power of the big lie, the falsehood pushed by Trump that the 2020 election was stolen, has acted as an intensifier of Americans' tribal political animosity. Election deniers are on the ballot in numerous states, with the Washington Post counting 291 such candidates in 48 out of 50 states. That is one sign that the concept of voter fraud is baked into the thinking of those who might foment political violence. According to the FBI, states that experienced significant upheaval related to the 2020 presidential election have been more likely to see an increase in midterm-related threats, with Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, and Wisconsin accounting for 58% of such threats. In many ways, far-right political figures are creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're telling their followers, if we lose, you've been cheated. A message that many seem to think makes revolution, and that's in quotes, justified before the votes have even been cast, much less counted. A poll by the Bright Line Watch organization, I don't think I know that, found that 1 in 5 Republican men believed that violence was justifiable, quote, right now against the U.S. government. The threats are not purely domestic either. Lawmakers and government officials are worried that external actors, including Russian and Chinese operatives, are meddling in the midterm elections by amplifying divisive, volatile issues, race, gender, immigration, and inflation, for example, on social media. The United States is a country awash in weaponry. The Switzerland-based Small Arms Survey estimates that for every 100 Americans, there are 120 civilian guns. That only adds to the worries of local, state, and federal officials who must consider the prospect of violence that the elections and their outcome conjure in the wake of the January 6th bloodshed in Washington, with politicians and political influencers too often rewarded for staking out extreme positions, in turn stoking extremist violence for the good of the country. Let us hope that cooler heads prevail. Oh boy. Otherwise, the true outcome of the 2022 midterm elections may be a new normal in U.S. politics defined by disinformation and violence. And that sort of ignores the reality of the 2020 election, which was disinformation and violence. But hey, it could happen again. And it's kind of true. All right, let's see. Somewhere in here, because I was in Philadelphia, I took special notice of it, but now I see that for whatever reason it didn't make it into Pocket, but I'll see if I can't find it, pardon me, via Twitter. But over the weekend, the former guy, speaking again, had apparently decided once again ahead of time that before the elections have even been held, he knows for sure that it's definitely being rigged, and everybody should know that he totally won, though we haven't voted yet, and specifically that the cheating will have begun in Philadelphia. How do you like that? And Pennsylvania, I guess that's where his focus lies. Here's the story, now that I see it again, was circulated via, Rolling Stone magazine. And let's see who our author is, Aswin Subsang and Adam Ronsley, with the piece titled hold on for the giant pop-up. Trump plans to challenge the 2022 elections, which haven't been held yet, of course, starting in Philly, which is why I went there, to make sure that he would not get anywhere with it. I wish that had been my mission. The former president is fixated on challenging the results of Pennsylvania's Senate race, not the gubernatorial race, I guess that's a given, but the Senate race, which he views, as one source puts it, as a, quote, dress rehearsal for Trump 2024. All right, so that sets the table for you, but of course it's now time to prepare for our break. But I remember now why I was so interested in this thing, not just because I was in Philadelphia, but skimming through, I saw some names lighting up the screen that I thought deserved some additional mention and discussion. But there you have it. So he's targeting the vote counting, I guess, in Philadelphia, which, okay. I mean, I don't know why. I guess he didn't make any headway in Detroit, so he figured he would try Philadelphia, one of the next most reliably Democratic cities. Of course, source of a gigantic chunk of the votes that will be cast in Pennsylvania. Interestingly, though, it's just interesting that the focus remains on the Senate race and not on the gubernatorial race. I don't know whether that's just he thinks that's a lost cause, or Trump only likes the fancy federal stuff. I'm not sure which. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, let's see. Here's what we've got from Rolling Stone. I remember now what I was so interested in this story about, not just the fact that I was in Philadelphia. And by the way, congratulations to Philadelphia on becoming an interesting destination city again these past, probably 15, 20 years that I have been thinking about spending more time there. And it's been a while. And speaking with my parents, who spent a good deal of time in Philadelphia in their own rights many years ago, who said, not really always a place you really wanted to spend time until, I guess, recent days. It's been part of the rebirth of a lot of American cities this way. But spent a good deal of time in the Reading terminal market and really enjoying it, in the Chinatown area, all over the city. Those two things are, of course, pretty much immediately adjacent, so it doesn't sound like I really was all over the city. But I walked a good deal of it. Not all of it by any means, but at any rate, Philadelphia, the focus of this story. How did this not get parked in Pocket? I don't know, because I'm going to need it now in order to read the thing, because Rolling Stone. But here's the deal. Let me read the story. In early September, Donald Trump welcomed a handful of Republican allies to Manhattan's Trump Tower. It's not his, it's Manhattan's, with an urgent message. He saw a, quote, scam happening with midterm election voting in Philadelphia and elsewhere in Pennsylvania, and he wanted conservatives to do something about it. Of course, no voting had taken place. He was just imagining a scam happening with midterm election voting in Philadelphia. The scam being Republican candidates that he had endorsed were going to lose overwhelmingly in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania probably overall, Philadelphia for sure. And that's a scam because why am I not winning? I am me. I should be winning, and I'm not. During our briefing, he was concerned that 2020 is going to happen again in 2022, says former senior Trump administration official Michael Caputo. That's the name that rang a bell that popped up again, referencing Trump's debunked assertion that voter fraud in Philadelphia helped win Pennsylvania for Joe Biden. Now, Pennsylvania very frequently goes Democratic, and very frequently goes Democratic because of overwhelming Democratic support in Philadelphia. Also very typically the case in Pittsburgh. And the rest of the state, I guess, ends up scratching their heads because they say, I know 12 people in this town and they all voted Republican. I don't understand. Everyone around me filling up the farmland voted for Republicans. Sure, there are literally 17 million times more people in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia combined than there are in all of the rest of the state. But hey, the point is I don't go there, so I don't really know what's going on. And I don't know how many people there are, and I'm kind of enumerate. So isn't that cheating? Well, anyway, that's the point of the actual article. But what I took away from it at first anyway was the mention of Michael Caputo again. Caputo, who attended the meeting alongside Bradford County Commissioner Doug McLinko, whoever those people are, that guy is anyway, and retired CIA officer Sam Faddis, said they had a message back to the former president. Our team encouraged him to be concerned. That needed no encouragement whatsoever. Furthermore, I'm advising Republicans to recruit and train election observers and a team of attorneys to oversee historically problematic precincts. But it's not just one meeting, and it's not just Philly. Okay, all a good lead for the bigger story that Rolling Stone wants to cover. I want to pause again and remind you, Michael Caputo, I was thinking about this guy because I remember his name, and it occurred to me, wasn't this the MFer, if you don't mind my saying so, who a couple of months ago was begging God to spare him from metastatic head and neck cancer, and if he would just give him another shot at life, he would turn it all around and be a better person and really launch into a meaningful life, etc., etc. And then he wasn't, in fact, apparently, spared the cancer that by most estimations was slated to kill him within a couple of months, and he's using his second chance at life to foment insurrection all over again. You may recall that it was Caputo who, upon discovering that he was in real trouble with cancer, also had a bit of a mental breakdown, holed up in a hiding spot somewhere, and tweeted maniacally that there were assassins after him and they were going to have to kill him if they wanted him to stop fighting for truth and justice through Mr. Trump and yada. And he was the most absurdist partisan warrior, but he was also sure that he was being targeted for assassination and And then he overcame that mental breakdown but like I said, spent the next round of PR visits, I guess, telling reporters that has his life changed by cancer, and if he could just make it to the other side, he's going to do it all differently. And then he made it to the other side, and he did it exactly the same way. Just wanted to point that out for the record, in case anybody was keeping score on those markers and thought that it might be best to say, well, having reneged on the deal, we should claim that marker after all, and I'm sorry, your time on Earth is just finished now, and you'll have to answer for having lied about your intentions for your second chance. But, things don't often work out that way in real life. Anyway, as they mentioned in Rolling Stone, it's not just one meeting and it's not just Philly. In recent months, Trump has convened a series of in-person meetings and conference calls to discuss laying the groundwork to challenge the 2022 midterm election results. Four people familiar with the conversations tell Rolling Stone. In these conversations, pro-Trump groups, attorneys, Republican Party activists, and MAGA diehards often discuss the type of scorched earth legal tactics they could deploy. And we could tell you about the scorched gallows tactics that ought to be deployed in retaliation, but we'd like to keep that under wraps for now. And they've gamed out scenarios for how to aggressively challenge elections, particularly ones in which a winner is not declared on election night. If there's any hint of doubt about the winners, the team's plan to wage aggressive court campaigns and launch a media blitz, because there was no downside to doing it last time. Trump himself set the blueprint for this on election night 2020, you see, when, with the race far from decided, he went on national television to declare, "Frankly, we did win this election." Trump has been briefed on plans in multiple states in critical races, including in Georgia, but Pennsylvania has grabbed his interest most keenly, including the Senate contest between Democrat John Fetterman and Trump-endorsed GOP contender Mehmet Oz. If the Republican does not win by a wide enough margin to trigger a speedy concession from Fetterman, or if the vote tally is close on or after election night in November, Trump and other Republicans are already preparing to wage a legal and activist crusade against the, quote, election integrity of Democratic strongholds such as the Philly area. So you're just going to have to hang him, I guess. Trump's focus on Pennsylvania, however, seems to be more about his own political future than about party allegiance or fealty to his celebrity endorsee. As he hosts meetings on possible 2022 election challenges, he's also laying the groundwork for a run in 2024, where Pennsylvania again promises to be critical and competitive. As one source who has spoken to Trump several times about a potential post-election day legal battle over the Oz-Fetterman race puts it, Trump views a potential midterm challenge as a dress rehearsal for Trump 2024. Trump won Pennsylvania in 2016 and then lost it to Biden in 2020 by more than 80,000 votes. And if the two candidates rematch in 2024, it could well be the state that picks the next president. At the Trump Tower meeting in September, Trump also pushed the officials on their efforts to limit mail-in voting, the Morning Times and Semaphore report. The biggest 2022 boon for Trump's 2024 hopes could come if Doug Mastriano, the state's Trump-touting 2020 election-denying GOP nominee for governor, manages to pull off an upset. But the people in Trump's orbit, reading the same polls as everyone else, see little chance of that happening. Trump is gripped by the belief that he got cheated in Philadelphia in 2020, and this time around he has privately demanded his allies concentrate additional firepower and legal resources on the Commonwealth's largest and most racially diverse metro area. Gee whiz, how did he lose? In recent weeks, according to two people with knowledge of the situation, the ex-president has asked several advisors and at least one of his attorneys what national and Pennsylvania Republicans are doing to prevent Democrats from, in his words, quote, stealing it in Philadelphia like they did last time. Trump's preparation to undercut the midterm elections is part of a broader GOP attack on electoral democracy, since Trump's tumultuous and ultimately violent campaign to overturn the results in 2020. He and other prominent conservatives have turned lies about, quote, voter fraud and, quote, stolen elections into GOP orthodoxy. And that orthodoxy has supercharged existing Republican Party efforts to limit ballot access, all in the name of election security. By the way, that would bring me around to making mention of a tweet I saw just before airtime from John Nichols from over at The Nation, noting what he says is New York Times offering a case study in both-siderism. The paper reports that the threat to democracy is either coming from violent extremists who seek to overturn elections, or possibly from, quote, liberal teachers, professors, or media personalities, and those who seek to make it easier to vote. Not sure exactly which one it was, but hey, could go either way. It's either people who are threatening to murder people for voting or saying the elections are already rigged, or it could be from people who say you should go out and participate in this vote. Everyone should have a chance to have their voice heard. Go vote. We think it should be easier to vote. Could be either one. All right, now back to the Rolling Stone article. Oh, let's see. Oh, right. We had left off by reading, Trump hyping this up and making this nonsense into GOP orthodoxy, and that orthodoxy had supercharged existing Republican Party efforts to limit ballot access, all in the name of election security. That's not, however, how Team Trump describes its own efforts. It's important to prepare for legal fights that will inevitably arise, says Hogan Gidley, former White House official who now is vice chair for the Trump-aligned Center for Election Integrity at the America First Policy Institute. The effort that the Center for Election Integrity is focused on started at the beginning of this year. We've been seeding efforts across the country in important states. That's SEEDING instead of the CED seeding, which is what they ought to be doing. Because having people on the ground locally is key to those efforts, because if you're not at the table, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Very clever. The other prominent Trump loyalists also say they've been gearing up for a potential electoral fight, particularly if there are close races. No matter what happens, I'm not giving up on getting rid of those voting machines. I will not stop until the machines are gone, says Mike Lindell, the pillow guy, who notes he is similarly prepared to spend millions of dollars on lawyers in possible 2022 legal battles. When does he run out of money? By the way, the MyPillow CEO, a personal friend of Trump's, was a major financial supporter of multiple efforts to overturn and delegitimize the 2020 presidential election results. Patrick Byrne, the former Overstock CEO who advised then-President Trump when the latter was weighing using increasingly authoritarian means to cling to power, is working with Trump's one-time national security advisor and notorious spy, Michael Flynn. By the way, how much was Overstocks.com ever worth that the CEO is continuing to be able to just spend like a maniac like this? He's always, in my awareness of him as a political actor, been the former Overstock CEO. Like, that's for quite a while now. Where is the rest of this money coming from? I guess once you're a billionaire, money just falls out of the sky now. The duo have formed a group called the America Project, a great name, to enlist like-minded activists and Trumpists. We have made proper preparations for post-election challenges if necessary, but our overwhelming focus is on having a clean, transparent election, which obviates the need for post-election legal scuffles, he says. However, the simple Trump and GOP definition of a clean election is typically one in which their side wins. For the moment, the most heated battle over Pennsylvania election law is focused on the state's rules for mailed-in ballots and is being waged by legal teams for the Republican National Committee. The dispute, which surfaced both in the 2020 election and in the 2022 Republican Senate primary, Republicans have since tried to stop election boards from counting any mailed-in ballots cast without handwritten dates. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in May that tossing out undated ballots violated the Civil Rights Act by disenfranchising otherwise qualified voters over a meaningless requirement that has no bearing on a voter's eligibility. The case led the Third Circuit to instruct Pennsylvania election boards to count undated ballots. In a ruling last week, the Supreme Court threw out the Third Circuit's decision, but did not rule on the underlying legality of counting undated ballots. Absent a clear federal position on the ballots, the state is left with conflicting court rulings on whether or not to count them. The state's Commonwealth Court previously ruled against the Oz campaign and ordered undated ballots can be counted in a non-precedential case filed by his primary challenger, David McCormick, in May. In a 2020 split decision, Pennsylvania's state Supreme Court ruled that undated ballots would count in that year's election, but not in future elections. Governor Tom Wolf and Acting Secretary of State Lee Chapman have both issued guidance that counties should count undated ballots, citing both the Oz case and Third Circuit ruling. But last week, the Republican National Committee and a coalition of Pennsylvania Republicans filed a suit in the state Supreme Court asking it to rule that election boards should not count the ballots. They keep asking that, and the court keeps saying you should, and they keep filing new cases saying, can't we ask that you not? The feud over mailed ballots in Pennsylvania marks a case of deja vu for the state. The GOP is being represented in its undated ballot suit by attorneys Kathleen Gallagher and John Gore. The two previously represented the Pennsylvania Republican Party in its attempts to overturn the 2020 election over late arriving mail-in ballots through a Supreme Court challenge. Porter Wright and Jones Day, the firms involved in the 2020 suit, both faced an intense public backlash for efforts aligned with Trump's push to overturn the election. And much like the 2020 fight over mailed ballots, rhetoric in the run-up to midterm elections is growing heated. MAGA candidates like Arizona's Kari Lake and Blake Masters, running for the state's open governor and Senate seats, and New Hampshire Senate candidate Don Bowlditch have all refused to commit to accepting results on Election Day. I think I read just yesterday Kari Lake taking the super popular, I'm sure, idea of, what did she say? She was going, I guess the Super Bowl is slated this year for being, to be contested in Arizona. And let me see if I can find this again. But she's apparently holding out the threat of, and she's going to do it too, if she's elected, she says she will cancel the Super Bowl in Arizona. Why? Yeah, here we go. Let's see. I happened to see Will Bunch tweeting about it yesterday and just saying, I kind of think this is politically unpopular, but honestly, after the last 7 years, I don't know what to think anymore. Kari Lake, threatening to cancel the Super Bowl. The reason being what? I guess I have to open this up in a new, tab here and see this MSN, piece. Kari Lake, the Republican nominee for governor in Arizona, recently said she'll cancel the Super Bowl scheduled to take place in February in Glendale if the NFL, this is interesting, if the NFL goes against her planned immigration policies. Why would they do that? I don't know, but just in general, protest them. And the reason to protest them is, of course, that they call for confronting migrants with the United States military at the border. So I had a feeling it was eventually, the volume of immigration and migration these days is will only get worse, of course, with climate disasters increasing. But eventually it will come to the point where the question will be one of, well, look, are you going to just machine gun migrants at the border or not? Republicans are pretty sure that they have the stomach to do just that. And they very well may, because they're kind of crazy. And so now, I guess, just preemptively, she's letting the NFL know. In case the NFL wants to step in and say, you shouldn't machine gun migrants at the border, she will cancel the Super Bowl. Now, I don't know if there's any plans at the NFL to take a stance on immigration at all, but it would be hard to ignore that sort of humanitarian crisis and act of terrorism. Shooting migrants at the border. Of course, she's just saying, I'm just putting the military there. I might not, she would claim, I didn't say shoot them. I just would put the military. That would intimidate them into not crossing the border. And it might, who knows. But I think it's the threat of the shooting that will really do the trick. But anyway, I don't know why the NFL or why she thinks the NFL would intervene, although they might intervene or be asked to intervene. You can't have the Super Bowl in a state that is threatening this at an official level. And she says, don't worry, it won't be up to them to boycott Arizona. I will cancel the Super Bowl, which of course is not something that she can do. She could, I guess, make it difficult or even impossible to hold the game there. But as I recall, there were several other states in this country, and many of them would be interested in hosting the Super Bowl. And I guess that would be just fine with everybody. It doesn't really make any difference where the Super Bowl is played. It's just, okay, lots of money not going to Arizona now, lots of money going elsewhere, and lots of hotels in Arizona refunding money to people who had reserved rooms there, or will have by that point reserved rooms. So, okay, an interesting ploy, and you never know. Anyway, she's kind of crazy, and so she might do that. Now, back to the Rolling Stone article. Trump supporters in the media have also begun to float a familiar narrative. Fox News' Tucker Carlson recently backed Lake's refusal to accept election results, declaring, if it is fair, Kari Lake is going to win. In Pennsylvania, radio host Mark Levin has accused Democrats of, quote, trying to steal the election for Fetterman, although I assume this is just a typo, calling him Fetterma instead, over the issue of undated ballots. Chapman, whose office oversees the state's elections, says workers have begun receiving a number of, quote, violent threats over the issue of undated ballots. I also read over the weekend, was it in Nevada, perhaps, where something like 10 of the 17 counties have seen their elections officials resign in recent months, largely due to the volume of threats being made against them for various reasons. Republicans downplay the similarities to 2020. It's normal for there to be all kinds of challenges heading into an election and after. That is actually quite true, says Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union and a Trump ally. This is good, and this is the way competent campaigns run. That might be overstating the case for this particular situation. Even before the election, conservative and pro-Trump groups have closely monitored state and county election rules. America First Legal, a nonprofit run by former Trump advisor Stephen Miller, launched a successful bid in Chester County to require increased security at ballot drop boxes in the county and segregation of ballots after security camera footage obtained through an open records request showed voters dropping off more than one ballot into boxes. Trump's apparent focus on buttressing Republican legal infrastructure in Pennsylvania stands in contrast to the relatively small sums the former president has put into the race to boost Oz. MAGA Incorporated, I didn't even know there was one, the Trump-backed super PAC supporting MAGA congressional candidates in 2022, has so far spent just $770,000 in ads, TV ads for Oz, a small amount relative to the $34 million or $770,000 versus $34 million that the Senate Leadership Fund Super PAC has pledged to spend on Oz. Trump and national Republicans have also not opened the funding floodgates for Doug Mastriano, who Trump backed in the Republican gubernatorial primary, as Governor Mastriano would have great influence over the state's election rules in the next presidential election. But his campaign has operated on a shoestring with little outside funding and a near total absence from Pennsylvania airwaves. At least some Republicans in the state say they have taken notice of the lack of funding from the former president, and it's a sore subject. There's a lot of people that were Trump supporters who backed him through thick and thin, one Pennsylvania Republican attorney active in politics tells Rolling Stone. That's not lost on them, though most everything else, I guess, actually is. So, yeah, that I thought was pretty surprising, an interesting focus for it to be Philadelphia of all places, but yeah, sure, why not? But yeah, I was kind of surprised to see Michael Caputo's name pop back up. I guess he's survived, and now we have to continue dealing with him. But yeah, others responded to my pointing that out by supplying links to various puff piece write-ups or profile write-ups of Caputo, detailing his, promises to God and everyone else that he would do things very, very differently if he were just given another chance. And then he got it, and turned out he was kind of a liar. So, let's see. Can I find those profiles, because there were definitely some people who jumped in and said, yeah, I totally remember the same thing too. And here's the link. Yeah, here we go. SFDB joining in response to this. I had said, yeah, wasn't he the guy that said he would do it all differently? Yep, he is. And a link here is provided to a Politico piece from when? Let's see, Politico magazine, August 27th of last year, 2021. The magazine piece, the Friday cover magazine story, "It Nearly Killed Me, Michael Caputo's Life After Years Fighting for Trump. After a public meltdown and cancer, Michael Caputo is re-examining his career as a smash-mouth politician." And his conclusion, I guess, a year later is, yeah, I did a pretty good job actually as a smash-mouth politician, and I should continue to do so now that I've gotten a second chance. So you can read the rather lengthy and I'm sure infuriating profile at Politico magazine if you want to. The excerpt that SFDB grabbed here for screenshots is a quicker read. Thought maybe I'll add it before we head into our top of the hour break. And it reads, "And in the almost 6 months since he was deemed cancer-free, a span of time in which I've spent dozens of hours talking with him in New York, in Texas, and over the phone," our reporter for Politico magazine says, "Caputo, in his convalescence, has been grappling with what to do with what he sees as a second chance. In speeches to GOP grassroots groups, he has advocated for COVID vaccines, believe it or not, putting him in opposition with many fellow Trump supporters, friends, and allies, up to and including Roger Stone, a man he considers as close as a brother," which is bad news, really, if you're looking for him to have some sort of epiphany. "A man he considers as close as a brother. He's struggled with what to make of the malevolent events of January 6th. He's worked to decipher a transformative dream he had on what might have been his deathbed. He's drawn closer than ever to his Catholic faith, even as he vacillates between professions of Zen-like serenity and residual and palpable bile. Hate, he still feels, as he once put it, for the nattering media, the preening investigators, the innumerable liars and attackers." Sounds like a second chance guy, right? All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. There's a little more to these excerpts, by the way, about Michael Caputo, in case you wanted to get even more annoyed with him. I left off with his vacillating between professions of Zen-like serenity and residual and palpable bile. The hate he still feels, that's in quotes, hate, as he once put it, for the nattering media, the preening investigators, the innumerable liars and attackers. Last week, and this, again, from a profile last year, in addition to a return to jobs in the public relations and insurance industries, he started coursework towards a master's degree in theology. Caputo has moved not just politically and spiritually, but physically, too, to Florida. The precise place, for whatever reason the writer notes, I agreed to not reveal. Oh, the precise place in Florida he agreed not to reveal. Having concluded that he has no choice but to attempt to flee a level of partisan harassment that is part of a toxic political environment in which he once reveled, and that he admits he helped create. And another screen grab here. A bit more than 6 months shy of 60 years old, Caputo is not who he used to be. And it's not just because he's significantly thinner and remains physically weakened from punishing rounds of radiation. He's not who he used to be and can't be, he has told me repeatedly, because he's convinced that doing what he was doing, trafficking in the social media acidity and angry slash-and-burn politics that have come to define this disquieting and unsettled American moment, is what almost killed him. Not metaphorically, but literally, as specific and causal as cigarettes and lung disease. I think I finally understand after everything. He told me at the respite center, there is much more to life. Like going back and doing the exact same things all over again. That's what I should be doing. So, maybe a third chance. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Well, Michael Caputo breaking his life-saving deal. Seems kind of dangerous. I wouldn't want to be in that position. But okay. But hey, I'd love to be apparently invulnerable to all attacks. That'd be amazing. What a fun thing. All right. Well, let's see. Gosh, a lot more to round up here, and I'm not certain in what order we ought to be doing it. Oh, it looks like the New York Times spent another weekend interviewing people from Trump supporters in diners again, and came up with the very lengthy report. Their America is vanishing. Like Trump, they insist they were cheated. Yes, their America is vanishing. It's rural, white, etc., etc. I don't know. I guess having been reminded of the existence of the Amish community by a weekend in Philadelphia, I just would point out the Amish way of life was vanishing, but they got over it, and they seem fine with it, and maybe you need to talk to those guys. Anyway, guess what? They're so upset that they're going to undermine and destroy democracy again, because that's not part of the America they were looking to restore, apparently. That seems so odd to me that wasn't a part of their memory of America. I saw an interesting meme circulating over the weekend that no doubt has been around for 100 years or more, maybe literally 100 years or more, but of course there weren't memes being circulated by social media at the time. But making a good point, didn't love the photo that they chose to illustrate. It was one of the familiar Willy Wonka shots, smiling and head resting on fist, head cocked and looking at the camera. But okay, this one got plastered with the meme verbiage, which was basically something along the lines of, you're worried that whites are becoming a minority in this country. Why? Why is that a problem? Are minorities treated like second-class citizens or something? I thought it was just a good and succinct way of putting it, right? Next time you run into somebody who says, and pretty soon whites will be a minority in this country. Yeah? Well, what's the problem? We treat our minorities equally, right? We're post-racial. There's no racism anymore. I don't even see color. What's the problem? How come that scares you so much? You think that you're going to get treated unfairly because you're a minority? Is that? Do you have reason to believe that minorities are treated unfairly in this country? I thought it was the opposite. So that was kind of interest, I thought. Let's see. Oh, also over the weekend, news from Marco Rubio that he's taken to Twitter to let us know that one of his supporters and campaign workers was viciously attacked and beaten because, he says, just simply because he was a Republican. He's fairly certain that the attacker told the victim that I'm doing this to you because you're a Republican. Republicans aren't allowed in this neighborhood, and how dare you, and beat him severely. And while we are always saddened to see people beaten severely, I have to point out, as internet sleuths have pointed out, that this rings a little bit untrue in the same ways that the backwards B carved in the face attack rang true, and various other alleged attacks on property crimes in most cases against Republicans. This is a little different. This is a physical attack. But none of the other witnesses to the attack and none of the police reports tend to indicate that there was any mention of political motivation for the attack. And two, it turns out that the internet sleuths have come to the conclusion, I don't know whether it's correct or not, but now that the name of the victim of the attack has, I think, been revealed by the Rubio campaign, the work of the internet sleuths looks to check out, and it turns out, let's see, I have a couple of tweets on the subject here from, let me pull up the originals here, Chad Loader. Chad is, according to his Twitter bio here, writer about extremism, privacy, OSINT. What is that? OSINT, I guess, an intelligence operation of some kind. And, of course, anti-fascism, a big topic for Chad, pointing out that for anyone else doubting that the campaign volunteer is this same person that they identified as a well-known white supremacist, Christopher Monson, it turns out that it's been confirmed. Patriots Perspective, I don't know what this is, News Behind Truth. I guess this is perhaps a pro-Rubio, pro-Republican organization tweeting out, former Hialeah City Council candidate Christopher Monson was attacked in Hialeah while campaigning and door-knocking for Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio. Christopher told PatriotsPerspective.com that he was being followed by the FBI, Antifa, and other gangs during his 2020 campaign. But now, of course, during the 2022 campaign, Marco Rubio announcing, last night one of our canvassers wearing my T-shirt and a DeSantis hat was brutally attacked by 4 animals who told him Republicans weren't allowed in their neighborhood in Hialeah. Turns out, like I said, there's nothing in the police report that says that there was any sort of mention of political motivation. But you should also know that the thread is now accompanied by video of this self-same, what's his name? Christopher Monson, who appears here in video from the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally in his uniform with his, white supremacist, I guess, ish group here, dressed up in the uniform, the polo shirt, the helmet, the tactical helmet and flag and sunglasses. And Chad Loder's got a lengthy thread on it here. Let's see. Starting with the Marco Rubio claim, accompanied with 3 photos of this guy having been beaten and on his way to the hospital. Chad answers, this guy? Didn't he attend the deadly 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville wearing the uniform of the League of the South, a KKK-affiliated white supremacist group? And there's a photo of him doing just that. There is, of course, video of him as well, and it plays here. I got the sound on, so I'm not sure what he's saying. Chad Loder once again saying, hey, Marco Rubio, is this your campaign staff for wearing the uniform of the white supremacist group League of the South, the deadly rally, Unite the Right rally, saying they will not replace us? Who is the they he's referring to? There also is embedded in this tweet the tweet from Miami Against Fascism, who writes, with high confidence, we are calling that the Marco Rubio canvasser who was attacked and hospitalized last night was Christopher Monson, a.k.a. the Cuban Confederate, I guess as he calls himself, who has a well-documented history of advocating white supremacy and deep involvement in Miami GOP politics as well. So they have quite a bit to say about him, actually. Miami Against Fascism does. See this detailed thread, they say, on Christopher Monson. He's a former member of the neo-Confederate hate group League of the South and attended the Unite the Right March in 2017. During his failed run for Hialeah City Council, he tried to distance himself from his history with little success. And I guess there wasn't much room for success since there are so many pictures of him doing this stuff, working as the Cuban Confederate. In 2019, Christopher Monson served as an elected member of the Miami-Dade GOP Executive Committee. He's also been heavily active in the Miami Springs and Hialeah Republican clubs. Miami Springs and Hialeah Republican clubs have long had close ties with the Miami Proud Boys as well. See our thread above where Proud Boys front group Floridians First hosted Monson at a local pizza joint during his bid for the Hialeah City Council. Of course, it goes on at some length, and it's, not a basis upon which ordinarily, involvement in politics itself, however partisan it may be, leads you to say, well, I guess he kind of had it coming to him. But for a guy who dresses up in the battle gear and the helmets and brings the weaponry and marches in the Unite the Right rally and threatens everyone else with violence, the fact that he wandered into a neighborhood where he wasn't welcome for whatever reason and got his ass kicked seems like the kind of comeuppance that even he must have known was on the table. He just thought if he wasn't in uniform and with a bunch of his other brothers, that he was somehow going to be immune. to this stuff. But sometimes, you make politics about gang violence, and then you walk into another gang and tell them, "Hi, I'm opposed to you." Well, I guess things are going to happen. I don't know. I just find it uniquely suited as an outcome to a person who dresses up in the battle gear and wears the helmets and the whole bit and essentially invites violence or signals that they're open to the prospect of violence, and then finds himself surprised by violence later on. That should be the opportunity for a second chance to denounce violence. But I'm guessing that he probably isn't going to do that. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting development from over the weekend, and I'll give you links to all the threads that I was looking at and reading about. Let's see. Other things over the weekend. Yeah, I read to you a little bit about the audio book that Bob Woodward is putting out. There's some more discussion of that in the Washington Post, and some interesting multimedia presentations of some of the more interesting clips from the audio, and a great description from Bob Woodward about exactly why he decided to go with the audiobooks and to release these tapes. There's some embellishment on the explanations we were able to offer in the pre-recorded shows, I think. So not necessarily worth a considerable amount of time afterward, but I find myself in agreement with Woodward that just hearing Trump deliver these lines in his voice, even though I could probably do that voice for you instead, hearing it for real, of course, it's just that much more impactful. And there's something about his voice that really hits differently, and I think he's right about that. And you should read Bob Woodward's own explanation of why he did it and his own way of putting that message. I'll give you the link to do it. But yeah, in their I'll just one grab from his thing. In their totality, these interviews offer an unvarnished portrait of Trump. You hear Trump in his own words, in his own voice, during one of the most consequential years of American history, amid Trump's first impeachment, the coronavirus pandemic, and large racial justice protests. And a very important and interesting, maybe I should read through this whole thing, but a very important and interesting point that comes up in this. There definitely is a moment in this process here where Woodward almost steps entirely out of the role of journalist. And it's over the coronavirus, response to the coronavirus pandemic. There's a portion of this in which he explains that he's basically saying, I really have to change my approach to how I discuss this. I mean, it's still journalistic in its approach generally, but rather than remaining just sort of an open vessel to, well, whatever, I'll ask questions and whatever Trump tells me, he tells me, and we'll write it up and we may or may not give it some additional spin, but that's still traditional journalism. But at some point it seems like he becomes concerned, overly concerned. Maybe there's no such thing as being overly concerned with the way Trump responded to the coronavirus pandemic, and says, I kind of have a responsibility to the country and the world here to make sure that the experts' advice is being delivered to the President of the United States here, because he's plugging his ears and la-la-laing his way through the advice being given by public health officials that could make or break the fate of humanity's, fight against this coronavirus pandemic. We're not sure we're going to make it out the other end of this thing, and in what condition. And he seems bound and determined, just simply for political reasons, simply not to listen. And he makes it his job to try and deliver the warnings of the experts that Trump has tuned out. And that's kind of weird and a departure from the traditional, journalistic approach to this thing. So I would encourage you to take a look, read this article I'll provide to you in my raft of links that I'll pass on to Scott. By the way, I have to scroll up because they have illustrated the piece with this ultra close up of Trump's face, just basically the bridge of his nose down to the, mid-chin. And there's a horrific skin situation going on here, just the way the black and white photo contrasts every pore of his disgusting skin here. But anyway, there's nothing like reading his description of how he's conducting these interviews and then hearing Trump in his own voice and Woodward's own description of the power of hearing Trump in his own voice. The power being, wow, he's powerfully terrible. I should be clear about that. It's not like he sounds like a powerful leader. It sounds like a powerful idiot. It's the power of his idiocy is overwhelming. All right. Let's see. A couple other stories and approaches to share with you. Oh, yes, right. One of the things we didn't get to share because it was happening on when? Did it happen on Friday or did it happen on Saturday? It may have happened Friday afternoon, and we wouldn't have gotten a chance to talk about it anyway because it happened after the show, but we also pre-taped, and then we didn't get to talk about it on Monday. Steve Bannon. Yes, sentenced to 4 months in prison for contempt of Congress. Of course, he is free pending appeal of that case. So, nothing changes for the time being. But just for the record, Bannon sentenced to 4 months in prison for contempt of Congress. I guess 2 months shy of the maximum that the prosecutors were seeking, 6 months. Bannon found guilty of 2 counts of contempt of Congress this summer for defying a subpoena from the House January 6th committee. Glenn Thrush and Alan Feuer reporting for the New York Times on this front. Stephen K.G.B. Bannon, as Scott calls him, a longtime advisor to former President Donald Trump, who aided in the effort to overturn the 2020 election, was sentenced on Friday to 4 months in prison for disobeying a subpoena from the House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Bannon, 68, found guilty of 2 counts of contempt of Congress this summer after Judge Carl J. Nichols rejected an array of arguments offered by Bannon's defense team, including that he was protected by executive privilege somehow from being compelled to testify. Others might be deterred from committing similar crimes, said Judge Nichols, a Trump appointee, by the way, who also imposed a fine of $6,500 on Mr. Bannon. He will remain free pending his appeal. In a contentious exchange with the defense team before announcing the sentence, Judge Nichols and Bannon said Bannon had shown no remorse for his actions and had yet to demonstrate he has any intention of complying with the subpoena. Bannon served briefly as Trump's top political advisor in the White House 5 years ago, yet he claimed that his interactions with Trump after the 2020 election were protected by executive privilege. Although Judge Nichols rejected Bannon's expansive interpretation of executive privilege, he cited several reasons for not giving Bannon the maximum 6-month sentence the government had requested, including Bannon's belated effort to reach an agreement with the committee, his service in the Navy, wouldn't bother counting that at this point, his lack of a criminal history, which is just for lack of having brought the cases, I guess, and the unsettled judicial status of executive privilege. After leaving federal district court, Bannon stood before the cameras to declare that the idea he saw himself as above the law was an absolute and total lie, as protesters repeatedly bellowed "traitor" through bullhorns a few feet away. As the throng pressed Bannon against his black SUV, he briefly lingered inside the half-open rear door, taking in the spectacle with a wry smile before taking off. The chaotic scene outside the court was emblematic of the push-and-shove rancor Bannon has evoked since becoming a fixture of Trump's political circle 7 years ago. Bannon, a rapid-talking provocateur who has used his daily internet radio show to skewer the government for prosecuting him, approached his sentencing with defiance. He told reporters that he viewed President Biden as illegitimate as he entered the court, flanked by his lawyers. He went on to claim that Democrats would face their judgment day in the coming midterm elections and urged all within earshot to oppose the Chinese Communist Party. The sentencing came a year after Bannon was held in contempt by the House. A year. Jeez. The government had accused Bannon, the one-time editor of right-wing news outlet Breitbart, of having pursued a bad faith strategy of defiance and contempt from the moment he received the subpoena seeking information about his knowledge of Trump's efforts to reverse his electoral defeat. The government argued for the maximum penalty, 6 months and a fine of $200,000. J.P. Cooney, the lead prosecutor, said Bannon had thumbed his nose at American democracy and flouted basic responsibilities incurred by witnesses who appeared at the courthouse every day. He showed his contempt for the criminal justice system, his contempt for the law, and his contempt for Congress, Cooney said, accusing Bannon of never lifting a finger to comply with his legal obligations to produce evidence or simply show up when summoned to assert his right not to testify. Bannon's lead lawyer, David Schoen, who represented Trump during his second impeachment trial, reiterated many of the same themes he raised then. He cast Bannon as a courageous defender of executive authority rather than someone who simply didn't want to obey a lawful legislative summons. Never at any time did Mr. Bannon believe in any way, shape, or form that he was acting in any way that was unlawful or against the law, Schoen said in a rambling hour-long speech in which he invoked the writings of James Madison, then veered off to slam a former Trump lawyer as a thug who had ripped him off. Okay. Bannon and his lawyers quietly reached out to congressional staffers on the eve of the trial with the belated offer of testimony if the government dropped the charges. It was rejected. Schoen, who Bannon once mocked on his radio show, recommended that he not spend any time in jail and instead receive probation. He argued that the Justice Department had declined to file indictments against 2 other former aides to Trump who had also disregarded subpoenas from the committee, Mark Meadows and Dan Scavino, deputy chief of staff who oversaw Trump's social media operations. Schoen also claimed that all of Bannon's actions were guided by the advice of his lawyers. So what? Shortly after the sentencing hearing, the committee formally issued a subpoena to Mr. Trump himself, requesting that he sit for a deposition and turn over documents next month. Bannon is not the only former Trump aide to be charged with disobeying a subpoena from the committee. Peter Navarro, the White House trade advisor, was indicted in June on contempt of Congress charges. He is scheduled to go on trial in Washington next month. Members of the House January 6th committee, who view Bannon as a central figure in several schemes aimed at unlawfully keeping Trump in power, said the sentence would discourage others from flouting legislative subpoenas. It won't. This is not the first time Bannon, who clashed with Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner and other aides during a brief and tumultuous tenure, as senior White House advisor, has faced a reckoning in federal court. In August of 2020, Bannon and 3 associates were charged with defrauding donors of more than $1 million as part of an online fundraising scheme purportedly linked to Mr. Trump's attempt to build a border wall with Mexico. After Trump lost the election, Bannon began lobbying for a pardon, even as he participated in meetings to discuss ways to overturn the election. Trump pardoned him just hours before leaving office. Still, Bannon faces separate charges in New York over his role in the fundraising project. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office has charged him with fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy, a case that largely mirrors the one erased by the pardon. So, there's that. And to the extent that any of the lock her up chanters end up locked up, well, that's a good thing for me. All right, let's see. Other news from over the weekend that deserves some mention before we take our break and anticipate hearing from Joan. Let's see. Oh, yes. Right. News from Florida that a Miami judge has dismissed the first voter fraud cases brought to court by DeSantis with his fake setups of people who registered to vote with the permission of the officials behind the counter way back when, and then found out that they were, in fact, disallowed and were arrested. And I mentioned to you last week that even the cops captured on body cams affecting these arrests are confused and embarrassed as much as the defendants are. Well, Miami judges are tossing these cases out, so the stunts coming to an end. At least it's good news for the defendants, but of course all the headlines have been garnered, and this goes on page 100 as a correction. Also information from the Washington Post over the weekend that the Mar-a-Lago classified documents included U.S. secrets about Iran and China, including, and I guess maybe it's starting to look like the unnamed country whose nuclear secrets were among the papers that Trump kept. Might have been Iran. It might have been secrets about, or secret intelligence about Iran's race, allegedly to find and acquire the ability to make its own nuclear weapons, but that's not entirely clear. But certainly information about their program and information about China as well that should never have left safe hands among the things lying around in drawers, I guess, in Mar-a-Lago. So not a huge surprise there, but some additional information anyway that's worth discussing, perhaps later in the week. All right, we'll be right back after this quick break. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter joins us. I've got my page of her latest stories already open and interesting. It's always interesting to see what pops up in the ad columns here. I keep the ads on for that reason. I actually kind of like seeing it, but if this is all cat gear for some reason. I don't think it's related to either of us. It just because now it's switched over to buying silver coins. But at least
do you have a cat?
I no longer have cat. I used to many years ago, but no cats at the moment. So I don't know why they would be, you know, if I had been ordering cat food at chewy.com or something, I could understand it. But this is cat gear that has come into vogue long after, I think, since the ownership of my cats. Like, people are now putting harnesses on cats and taking them for walks, I guess.
They are. The idea that it's not really great to let cats be free range outside, I think, is sinking in somewhat.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
So you see more people dragging their cats.
I guess so. I mean, yeah, our cats were indoor cats, but I mean, the idea of putting a harness on them and saying, you know, we're going for a walk, like, you know, to me, I mean, some cats I'm sure enjoy going out and getting some run around exercise or whatever, but yeah, I always thought that's really a dog thing.
I had an indoor-outdoor cat, a Siamese,
who
loved to go for walks.
Okay.
He just loved when my roommate and I took her dogs out and he could go with us. He'd run ahead and hide in the bushes and then ambush us. Scare the dogs.
Yeah, that seems like the sort of way a cat would like to treat a walk, I think.
Yeah.
But
the harness, not so much.
That one seems like... Right, like trying to put a costume on your cat for Halloween or something. Among the many things that just, I think, are universally hated by cats. But I guess not all cats, or at least it doesn't matter whether some cats don't like it, because somebody has bought harnesses and you're going in it. And that's it.
Meanwhile, I'm trying to figure out what my cat has planned for me. I walked into the room and he immediately started looking really furtive. Like I interrupted something nefarious. So,
well, probably, I guess, plotting your death.
Looking at me a little side eye. So, something's in store here.
Yeah, maybe he saw the harness thing and was just trying to tell you don't try it. I don't know. It's although culturally we're weird about the pets. It probably is a good idea to, you know, outdoor roaming cats thing. I think is maybe getting phased out. That's the way people used to keep their cats all the time, and I guess increasingly people are opting for the indoor option or something like that. But I did discover in travels abroad that people in other countries, certain other countries, think Americans are crazy, like for keeping their dogs on leashes and walking them at all. They have free roaming dogs all over Central America. And they think Americans are weird. Like, I don't understand why you would take your dog for a walk. Dogs love walking all over the place as it is. They don't want to be on a leash. Let them, if you just put them outside like your cats, then you don't have to walk them. And you know, the other thing is you don't always know where they poop, so you don't have to pick it up either. Which I think they have a point about, although it does leave the landscape litter.
Yeah, that is a good point.
You know, I mean, well, they do point out, you know, like cats, they'll, you know, mostly poop out of the way and give it a little covering of dirt. You don't have to go around picking it up unless the only place you take your dog to poop is people's sidewalk. Then you got to pick it up. So maybe we've done this to ourselves.
I think we probably have.
Okay, well, I hope that we can preserve democracy and find a better way to deal with poop in the future. But it's not looking good for either.
No, it's not. Poop happens. Lots of poop happens.
Yeah,
Lots
there's
of
no
poop
way to
could
put a stop
happen
to
in this
that.
election. So there
Yeah.
you go. Metaphorical
So,
poop.
yeah, that's so we'll try and keep a handle on it the best we can. I'm looking over the last couple publications. I don't know if that's still weighing on your mind, but of course you have a poultry joke in the last one.
And you reminded me that, you know, we go from chickens to turkeys, which of course means Thanksgiving, which of course means we come back from Thanksgiving and we have a debt ceiling continuing resolution fight.
Right. So there's
How
a
much
roundabout
of
way
our
of getting
time
to
has
it.
been spent talking about continuing resolutions, government shutdowns, and debt ceiling
I mean,
over the
as a
years?
percentage, it's got to be like 80% of our time because it's always
It does
happening.
feel like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's the standing joke. Is that, you know, even in July, we say, well, you know, as you know, government shutdown fight is coming eventually. I don't even know when. There's no CR or anything.
Well,
but
of course it's in July because
we have
they're
one.
out for the entirety of August.
Yeah.
And these days, half of September, and they have to have it done by September 30th. So, yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
and then
half from like, I don't know. March is usually when they finally get the last CR dealt with and have a budget in place. So we've got, you know, 3 months at most.
yeah, there's
during
really
the
not
year,
much
and
time.
it's not a pending fight.
Yeah, it's always on the table, and especially in an election year where after the August recess, there's really just literally only a few weeks until the budget deadlines, and then in election years they just don't come back. Really, they do a little bit of September work, and then they say we all have to run for re-election again, and they disappear to do their campaigning for October. So
Now the fight is what happens in the lame duck. And a lot of it is going to depend on what happens in the election, as always.
sure.
But it's sort of interesting to me that Republicans are, in the House anyway, are gloating so much, hence the cackle, the hens,
Right,
the
turkeys, ducks,
eggs laid counted before they're hatched.
Okay, yes,
I
right.
maybe didn't get that across in the headline.
Well, oh no, it's here. It's a House
I wanted to
Republicans.
use cackle. So anyway,
You did do that.
they have projected that
yes.
this is what they're going to do. They are going to take the debt ceiling hostage. They are perfectly willing to endanger the full faith and credit of the United States in order to force Biden to give them Social Security and Medicare cuts. And, of course, Medicaid. And, you know, to impose work requirements on any kind of social safety net program. Never mind that most of the people receiving these benefits are working or live in a household with workers.
Okay.
That they're doing this ahead of the election is curious to me.
Yeah, this is ordinarily the kind of thing you would hide the ball on until later.
But they are grabbing the third rail with both hands, and you know, not just the four guys vying for budget committee chair, but Kevin McCarthy, who said, yeah, that's what we're doing.
Okay, I
And
mean...
by the way, we're probably not going to fund Ukraine either.
Huh.
In the continuing resolution, this is going to come up in December. Things that you would not think would be popular outside of MAGA Republicans who are voting in November.
Yeah. Well,
things that might possibly drive even more Democrats to the polls. For
I
whatever
my
reasons,
doubts.
Republicans think this is a fine thing to announce right now.
I don't know. They are trying new and interesting things that sound like they would be politically unpopular for sure. Like telling the oldest and usually most reliably Republican voters that they will cut them off. Carrie Lake saying, I'll cancel the Super Bowl. That's out there as well. Another super popular position to take. Not really sure how that even came up, but she said as much. They're really pushing the boundaries. We'll get rid of democracy and freedom, two things that we usually like, and that Republicans like to wave the flag and say they're for.
I'm glad they're being super honest about it all.
I guess, in a way, yeah. Right.
It's very strange.
Yeah, it'll be amazing to watch people ignore it, too, or even say, I never heard that. They didn't say that to me. They did, but...
They did, and they are, and they will. They will indeed do all of these things, which is the scary part.
Yep.
I think we talked about that last week. Mitch McConnell, when he first brought up the idea of the debt ceiling being a great hostage to take, had absolutely no intention of shooting the hostage.
Right.
These guys will.
Yeah, well, I guess they, I don't know, they believe that everybody's been chickening out. You should really be trying this stuff, I guess, just to see what will happen, but I don't know if they... I mean, I don't know. I don't know whether they actually have thought through what they think will happen and they don't mind, or whether they just think it won't happen because how could it happen? I mean, everything just continues to work, right?
Some of them have to be aware of how dangerous this is and what could happen. I would assume. Do they not care? Do they... I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I definitely think there's a split.
It also doesn't help when Biden comes out and says it would be irresponsible to do away with, to repeal the whole idea of having a debt ceiling. So, thanks, Joe.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting with the door open for radicalism. You know, maybe you want to go through that door. Don't necessarily head the same
really
direction.
Time to go dark Brandon.
It is.
Great on taking steps to decriminalize weed. That was perfect. That was wonderful. Yeah. Good job.
Apparently it worked in Philadelphia this weekend. Holy moly.
So yeah, let's just keep a little bit of that going and realize your history. He's just such an institutionalist, and he's been at this for so long. I think that probably, the knee-jerk response from somebody who has been in the Senate for their entire life is, the idea that getting rid of something that I've been voting on forever is probably pretty radical, except that it's not. Yeah. There's nothing about the debt ceiling that is written in stone. It's not in the Constitution. They instituted it in World War I as sort of an accounting measure. Yeah. Really thinking of it as a wartime measure that didn't necessarily have to be a thing that stuck around. So, in fact, there's an argument that is unconstitutional.
Oh, you mean in terms of like our commitment to honoring the debts?
What does the 14th Amendment say about the debt ceiling? I don't know the exact words off the top of my head, although I should.
Sure. Well, there's other parts of the 14th Amendment that worry us.
Yes.
More so. But, I mean... certainly I guess the threat to there shouldn't be any opportunity to for people to doubt the validity of the debt.
Right. Section 4, the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payments of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned.
Insurrection or rebellion? That's curious that should come up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, there we go. The January 6th committee.
So it turns out that not only will they question it, but they'll also engage in insurrection and rebellion. So it makes sense.
Right.
They have read this. They just don't agree with it.
So yeah.
Well, that'll be interesting to see. And
if we're going to be originalist about the Constitution, here we go.
Oh, well, yeah. But that, oh, come on. I just wanted to be originalist about one part of it. And not even the amendments, or at least not all of the amendments. Just one of them. And not the first one.
No, not the first.
Yeah. I wonder about this.
Yes, the debt ceiling, and to their credit, Democrats are talking about it, but it's probably not going to be repealing the debt ceiling because Senate Democrats.
Yeah, they want to do it incrementally.
We are probably going to see them try to do something. We are going to see House Republicans insist that, no, they can't do that. We'll see. Yeah. It's actually a fight that's a year away, except that Republicans made it this year's fight. The debt ceiling is probably fine until about this time next year. We're not going to hit that. But now would be a fabulous time with Democrats in control, if Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema allow it, to say, all right, we have a permanently increasing debt ceiling. We're going to index it to the increase in, say, defense spending.
All right, yeah.
So whatever the increase of expenditures for defense is, we are going to raise the debt ceiling automatically 5 times that percentage, or something like that. There's a lot of ways they can structure this to just make it not an issue anymore. And hopefully this is what they will do. Hopefully they will not come back and say, oh, well, the responsible thing is to set another definite number for our ceiling. It's not. Yeah. It's not.
Well, it's pretty clear that it doesn't do anything in particular. They do this regularly, and it's become an increasingly bitter fight over how to punish yourselves for doing it. But for people who worry, well, if we just automatically raise the debt ceiling every time, then what's the point of having it? Well, 2 things. 1, what is the point of having it?
Yeah.
Good question. And 2, we keep automatically raising it. So, all the disasters that are supposed to happen if you just automatically raise the debt ceiling. Well, we've been kind of automatically raising it since forever anyway.
Yeah.
So what's the issue? Oh, look at our results. Our debt is so high.
Because the thing is, it is not the policy making apparatus here. It's just how we pay the bills. Mm-hmm. The money's already been spent. That fight has to happen elsewhere, and it does. But this is paying our bills. This is meeting the obligations that we have already made.
Yes,
we're not
true.
doing anything new when we raise the debt ceiling.
Yeah, right. That's it's not a new and different addition to the budget. You decided that's what your budget is going to be. Now you will have to borrow to pay for it. That's true. So go ahead and do that, as opposed to saying, well, we won't borrow to do it. Well, okay. But I mean, that does more than cut off your policy. You can't cancel the policy afterwards by doing this without also dragging down every other piece of the economy. You've just defaulted on your debts. That's bigger than saying we're not going to spend anymore. That's a different game. But because
you've already spent this money and now it's time to pay the piper.
Yeah. So a very Republican approach, I suppose. We'll just have a policy that we like for free, and then when the bill comes due, we'll default and then say it's everybody else's fault as well.
Which is how you end up with Donald Trump.
I guess so.
Perfect Republican.
I don't feel any responsibility.
That part of it never occurred to me before. So anyway, yes, it's stupid, and we're going to have a fight about it. And it's going to ruin everybody's holiday. So.
All right.
Same as usual.
Yeah. So in that sense, hey.
But it could motivate some people. The thing that Republicans finally got smart about I think it happened about the time that we had the ad of Paul Ryan pushing Granny off a cliff.
Yes.
Was that they realized they have to cut Social Security and Medicare in the future.
Okay.
They can't do it for current beneficiaries because they know that will raise holy hell and they'll lose one of their most reliable voting blocks. So, all of the cuts that they want to make are for future generations.
I see.
People our age.
Yay. Well, it was always said many years ago, I recall it always being said, yeah, well, you're never going to see your Social Security anyway. There was this moment in time
right.
when that was the popular view of things and say, well, maybe we shouldn't necessarily be so defensive of it. It's never going to be around for you and me. But,
well, see, and that's the thing that they had been working on as well from about the time that Medicare was approved. We're going to have to start undermining it, and we're going to have to say, well, it's not going to be there for people in the future, so they can't count on it, so they don't care about it as much.
Yeah.
And, they've really
kind of worked.
Pretty effectively injected that into popular thought.
Yeah, I would say, that seemed to have, it sunk in the 80s and became a Gen X assumption. But then, although as I recall, it was tied into the early, or I guess the 80s and 90s. Oh my God, there's no way we're going to be able to save the Social Security Trust Fund. It's simply destined for destruction, period. And then like 4 or 5 times in a row, they said, actually, we can fix it.
Right.
You know what? We did it. And then,
well, yeah, that's, why you and I have a retirement age of 67 instead of 65. Because in the 80s, they said, oh, no.
Right.
And raised the retirement age.
And now that we approach
they're
that.
Talking about raising it to 70. This is what Republicans are talking about. They're going to make it 70.
Yeah.
And then, and I'm not sure how official this is. I've been trying to find it. I've only seen it in an image that somebody took supposedly from the Commitment to America, but I can't find it in those documents, of starting to reduce benefits after the age of 90.
Because why would you need it?
Seems
the opposite of what you would need.
Yeah.
Wow. So, death panels. Or, essentially, as they say, you've made it to 90. How much longer should we have to pay for you?
Now you can start starving.
Wow.
It's the equivalent of the ice flow for Eskimo elderly people.
I guess. Wow. That's, I think I had heard that mentioned. But it wasn't my job to look for the source either. I see people talking about this. But you're saying you saw it in an image of the materials they handed out, but since then it's not.
But I haven't actually found that online. I haven't found the source material. So
maybe they thought better of that.
But it is exactly something Republicans would come up with. So I've got to do more research on that. But
okay. So
I'm sure they at least thought of it.
Yeah, I mean, right. I guess at this point, without any proof, it could be a hoax thing, or it could be they said, this is a great idea, and then someone said, no, it's a terrible... Oh, right. Terrible idea. Take that out.
Yeah, it might possibly
could
be an
either
earlier
one.
Draft.
All right.
That would affect people who are now old. Yes.
Yeah. Right. That would be scary. So I guess, good luck trying to figure out whether that was real or not. And there's no telling with these guys. It's as crazy as it is, it could absolutely have been real, and they absolutely would stand there and say, we didn't say that.
Yep.
So, all right. It's part of the difficulties of knowing what you're getting in this election. If you were ever tempted to vote, no one here tempted to vote Republican, I don't think. But I guess for all the people in the diners, like, they could put it to them that way. What if you ordered a 3-egg omelet and then they brought you out 1 egg and said, we never said it was 3. Would you be okay with that?
And it was hard boiled.
Yeah, right. And it's like, but it says right here, where did the menus are gone. What happened to the menus? Bring me back one of those menus. And they bring it back, one boiled egg.
Menu?
That's what it
What
says.
menu?
Yeah, and it's written on a piece of paper in pencil, on the back of your check. Here, menu. MENUYOO. Menu. All right. Well, I don't know. And I see that they were back in the diners talking to people again about the thing. Who had the...
Laura had a good post yesterday, actually, about, when you're saying working class, New York Times, and it's an old white guy sitting in a diner, you got to really think harder about who is actually working class.
He's not working.
Because it's not those guys anymore.
That's true. And really, it's really just a surprising thing, too. Like, we got to talk to the working class. So you go into this establishment, and the only people you talk to are the people who are not working.
Right,
there.
who have time to sit around and the day drinking coffee in a diner.
That's I mean, they may be working later, but right now, inside of this diner, the people who are working, they're the wait staff and the cooks. And one, they can't stop and talk to you. And two, they might have different ideas about what it means. And they might even be, maybe even a different color from the people who are sitting and drinking the coffee and telling you how everybody who's serving them is a bunch of freeloaders.
Uh-huh.
That's interesting. But they love to do that and go to the diners. And, I saw another big profile of that over the weekend, that their America is vanishing. That's it. The New York Times people. And they all insist they were being cheated as well. But yet here's all the coffee. Just keeps coming. So interesting. All right. Well, let's see. I guess there's really, it's at this point, it's just the only thing on the horizon is the election.
Yeah. And you talked at the outset about the election threats. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm writing up right now, actually.
Yeah, I guess that's what we have to focus on. So I spent the weekend in Philadelphia, so it's interesting to watch, just sort of see the election being conducted differently in a slightly different location. Total absence of any evidence of the gubernatorial election in Philadelphia. You'd never know what was going on.
Huh.
Zero campaign material, nothing on TV ads, no billboards, no signs, no nothing.
What about Senate?
Senate, yes. And certainly much more presence there, and presence from both sides, although nothing paid for by the Oz campaign was visible anywhere in Philadelphia. Third party
as a matter of
advertising.
fact, and I wrote this up yesterday,
yeah.
The campaigns, Republican Senate campaigns, are kind of broke.
I guess that's it.
They don't have the money to be running the ads, so it's only third-party ads that are running in most of the country for Republican Senate candidates. Or
I wonder if it's the same elsewhere.
Because, we had Rick Scott and his blowing $185 million on something.
Yeah, I wonder what it was.
For the Republican Senate committee.
Huh. But we don't know what.
They're far, far behind Democrats in terms of actual campaign fundraising. So they're having to rely more and more and more on dark money. Well,
that seems to be what was going on. All I saw from, I guess, in favor, the third-party stuff for the Oz campaign was, negative advertising against Fetterman, but it didn't make any particular sense. And that's one of the things that's a danger when you hand over your, supposed to not coordinate. And
right, you can't coordinate a message, so
right.
The message that is being sent is all over the place.
Right.
Yeah.
They had, but lots of traditional Fetterman materials and collateral visible in Philadelphia, and the only presence of the Oz campaign, giant billboards that would just say things like "Fetterman equals poverty and crime." I mean, that's bad. We don't want that, but I don't know how effective the message was, but it'll be very interesting. And then, of course, by the end of the weekend, Trump had announced that Philadelphia was going to be the big locus of the big, the next accusations of having stolen the election, even though he's not on the ballot. And, to be expected, I guess. All right. Well, then that's what we'll look forward to as we wind down the election season. We'll have another...
I'm going to give a plug right now because it's that time of year to the dailycoast.com/GOTV page.
Perfect. Okay.
There's still opportunities for getting out the vote, including election protection. Mm-hmm. And our great activism team collected all of those links for folks. So dailycoast.com/GOTV.
All right.
Go there.
You should. And give up a little extra money just to make sure that all the activities are covered. It's the only way, we have any hope of coming out the other side here. Not only winning the elections, but winning them overwhelmingly.
That too.
Yeah. Absolutely. All the GOTV operations depend on that, and of course, even when you've tapped yourself out, you can still show up and help out, and the opportunities there for everyone from the abled and the differently abled, regardless of your physical condition. There's certainly something that campaigns are willing to hand over to you to get your help with GOTV.
Absolutely.
Thanks again, Joan. We'll check in at least one more time before the election day itself, and who knows what your schedule will be then. So hope to see you next week.
I'm sure you will.
Great. Take care.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
That's right. We came back after all. Justice Putnam, who's been here the whole time, gets set to take you on his Tuesday journey. Let's see what we've got lined up for today. The American Rescue Plan. Remember that? Help 200,000 child care providers stay open. Let's figure out where we stand with them now. Oh, and, the rest of the world as well.